Yeah, my name is Ella Yo from Dunman High School. So this is an overview of what I'll be doing today. So firstly, I'll be giving a brief introduction to what C# is and how to set up the environment to start coding in C#. Then I'll be going through some like fundamentals that you will learn when you start learning any programming language, like the basic Hello World program and stuff like that. Then after that, I'll be going through some data manipulation, which is string manipulation, working with words and working with numbers as well, which is basically just like typical mathematical operators like plus, minus, times, divide. Then I'll be showing you how to get user input and if else conditional statements, which are like basically just control the program flow. And then at the end of it all, we'll be able to build a simple calculator. So let me start off with a joke that I thought of last night. I thought it was quite funny. Why do so many Python programmers wear glasses? Because they can't see sharp. Haha. Well, anyway, jokes aside, this is sort of like the official definition of what C# is. So it's an object-oriented language created by Microsoft to build apps on the .NET platform, which is a free cross-platform open source developer platform. That seems like a mouthful and like a huge chunk, but so let me break it down a little bit for you. So an object-oriented language basically means that C# is like heavily works around this concept known as objects. So you can code various objects. And what objects are, it's basically like it just contains data and code. So like maybe a good analogy would be, let's say you are coding like you're working on a game and you would need to create, like when you make a game, you would need to create like let's say a player and the weapons, the food and stuff like that, right? So you can create like a player object and a weapon object and another object for food. And like this concept of objects make it much more like much easier to reference the object and their attributes easily in the future. So because there will be a lot of interactions between the different objects. And advantages of object-oriented languages are that they are more reusable, scalable, and efficient. So the second like more difficult to understand part of this sentence is cross-platform. And what this basically means is that given the same like chunk of code, you can actually make it such that it can run on different platforms like Apple iOS, Android, and given that this is developed by Microsoft, the regular PC as well. An open source developer platform means that the source code for the language is like open to contributions. So basically anyone can like contribute to the development of the language, and there's a very large like user base. So yeah, the language will be constantly improving in functionality and such. So why should we learn C#? Here are some of like the commonly cited reasons why you should learn C# over other languages. So firstly, C# is an extremely powerful and versatile language, and you can make a ton of different types of projects with C#, like cloud-based services, mobile apps, and even games as well. And it's used in many applications around the world, and it's very, very widely used. It has gained it has rapidly gained a lot of attention and usage over in recent years, and has become one of like the most used languages, as well as like an industry standard in quite a lot of companies. And it's also used as like the main language in this game engine known as Unity, which is a very large game engine, which some of you might know. And some really big games that are created with this game engine include Assassin's Creed, Rust, and even Hearthstone. Thirdly, C# is comparatively easy to learn compared to other languages. And it also has like fast speed, which basically means that you can run the code quite fast. It has fast compilation and execution time. So which is a huge advantage if you are writing very like massive chunks of code. So for those who have prior experience in programming, when you hear C#, these other two languages might come to mind, C and C++, given the similar names. So I'll just be going through like a very brief comparison of the three languages. So C is a very old and widely used language, and it's sort of like a landmark programming language with many subsequent languages like Java and Python borrowing directly or indirectly from it. And the reason why the three names are so similar is because C# and C++ kind of like are extensions of C, and they use C as the backbone of their language. Yeah. C and the second one, C++, is a general purpose programming language, and it's object oriented as well, same as C#, and also used widely in the game industry as well as many other applications in general. So, like comparing these three languages, they are actually really similar in syntax, because as I mentioned just now, C++ and C# are extensions of C. So, yeah, they share a lot of similarities in the aspect, and C++ and C# also see quite a lot of the same usage. So as for their differences, C is what is known in computing terms as a low-level language. So although it sounds like low-level means that it's easy to learn, right? But actually in computing terms, a low-level language means that it is closer to machine language than human language. So that means that, yeah, it's harder for us to understand it intuitively. And in orders of from C to C++ to C#, C is the lowest level, and C++ is kind of like in the middle, and C# is the higher level languages out of these three. So C# is more readable and easier to learn, and there's a lot of things that you have to do. You have to code out in C and C++ that's already automatically taken care of for you in C#. And let me show you these code snippets to illustrate the idea a little bit. So on the left, you see a code snippet from C#, and on the right, it's in C. And it's coding the same thing, a simple calculator that takes in an operator, plus, minus, times, or divide, and then does the operation to two different digits that you will key in as well. And although it looks like the C# code is longer, but that's just because of the way that they coded it. And if you zoom in and look at it more carefully, you will see that like here in C#, it says console.write. And that's quite intuitive, right? You write something to the console. And then here it says convert.toInt32. So you just need to know that int stands for integer, and it's quite intuitive. It's like convert to integer. So it's quite readable for like humans. Like since we understand English, it's quite readable, right? But if you look at C, like it's printf, and that's not very intuitive. Like print still understandable, but why f, right? And scanf is the comparison is read line in C#, which is much more understandable to us. And here you can see like all these %.1lf, which is stating like the floating point value, the decimal value. So yeah, it's not very readable, and it's kind of harder to understand. And this pattern is consistent throughout. This pattern is consistent throughout like when you learn the language. So yeah, in general, C is harder to remember and learn as compared to C#. And this also means that if you learn C, learning C# will be easier. Yeah. And the third difference is ease and efficiency of coding. So in C and C++, okay, there's this important concept known as memory allocation when you code. And in C and C++, you have to do that manually to tell the computer like where you want to store pieces of information and such. But in C#, it's all done for you automatically. And I know right now it sounds like C# is clearly the superior language, considering that it's easier in so many aspects. But when like the reason why C# is more effective is that a huge part of this code is already done behind the scenes for you, so you don't have to do it again. But this at the same time, this gives up like very specific control over exactly what your program does. So yeah, there's a higher level of control in lower level languages. Yeah, so now that that's done with, we can get started. But so to start coding in C#, you need this thing called a code compiler, which basically just compiles your code and executes it. So I'm using this program known as Visual Studio Community. And to download it, you can just go to Google search Visual Studio, and the first link will probably come up from Microsoft, and click it and you will come to this page. But I have also included a link here and I will paste it in the chat. Okay, wait, sorry, I'm quite confused how to paste in the chat. Okay, never mind, I can just, yeah, follow the link here or just Google Visual Studio. But yeah, then you will come to this page and it says download Visual Studio. So you click on it and it doesn't matter whether you're on Mac or PC, Windows. Yeah, there's an option for both. And yeah, it's a very powerful program that can do a lot of things. Like here you can see, you can do Python development, JavaScript development, C++. So you only want to download like the specific thing that you want to do, which in our case is .NET desktop development for C#. And for those of, yeah, this is a very powerful program, so it probably takes quite a long time to download. So for those of you who don't have it, don't fret, you can go to an online code compiler. So I linked one here. Basically, if you search online code compiler, it should be the first thing that comes out. Wait. Yeah, let me paste it. I figured out how to paste. Okay. Yeah, so you can just come here. But for those of you who do already have Visual Studio though, you can go to your search bar and type Visual Studio installer. Like here. And then click on it and click modify. And then you will come to this page. And then you can click on this .NET desktop development to download it. And once you downloaded that, you will come to this page. So you create a new project. And what we want to create is a console app, which is basically like the simplest kind of app you can make with C#. Yeah, so before I start coding though, let me show you a sneak preview into like what we will be able to do by the end of this session. So this is a calculator that adds up two numbers. It's a very basic calculator. So basically it just asks for like your first digit and second digit. So you can use a decimal number as well, and it just prints the result. And don't ask me why it's all in capital letters. Maybe I was very excited when I coded this. So yeah, when you open Visual Studio, this is probably like what you will see. And if you're using the online code compiler, maybe it might be a little bit different with like more lines here using the using. And maybe like this seems quite complicated right now, like all these things that doesn't really make much sense. But actually, at this level, you don't really need to know exactly what these do. Just know that this kind of configures the file, and you need this basic setup to start coding in C#. But yeah, I'll just be very briefly like going through what each part does in simple terms. So this using statement is like kind of like just like telling the program that in this chunk of code you want to use things from system. And for those with prior like Python experience, I can draw some parallels to like importing libraries and modules. Like in Python, you import libraries and modules that you want to use in your code. So in C# you use the word using, and yeah, you can just access things from system after you say this. And the second one is namespace. So this kind of just specifies the project that you are coding in. So here you can see that this namespace is the same thing I named my file. And within these two curly braces is the code. So like you can also think of it as like a kind of like a container to contain code. And second one is class. So this is also like you can think of it as a container to contain code. And then the third one, static void main. This is like an very important container because everything we want to run in the main program will be written within these two curly braces. So we have to write it here. So yeah, I can just show you how to write like your very first program, the typical hello world. So in C# to print something to the console, you write console.writeLine, and then parentheses followed by open quotations. Then what you want to write. So in this case, you want to write hello world. And take note that it's capital C, capital W, and capital L. And at the end of every executable statement in C#, you have to write this apostrophe. And it's a very common thing to forget when you just start coding in C#. So if at any point of time, like your code doesn't work, just check whether each line has the apostrophe first. Yeah. So yeah, if you run this now, and to run your code, right, you click on this play button. And for those using PC, you can press F5 as a shortcut as well. So if you run your code now, you'll see this black window pop out for a moment. And what basically happened is that we told the computer that we want to write a line, hello world, to the console, right? But we didn't, and yeah, it executed that and it's done, so it closed. So in order to read what you wrote, you have to specify the program that you want to read the line with this command. So once you do that, if you run the code now, you'll be able to read what you wrote. Yeah. So now that I've shown you the first program, let me just, before I continue, let me just show you this very important concept in all programming languages, which is commenting. So comments are basically like just short notes that you can write for yourself at the side. And this is very important in programming to like tell you what you wanted like a bunch of code to do. Like let's say you work on a very complicated project and you come back a few months later. Yeah, maybe you don't understand what you did a few months before anymore. So your comments, writing it out in plain English would be very helpful. Like this, and this is very helpful for like if you're working in a project work as well. So in C# to write comments, you use the 2 slashes. And this just basically tells the program that anything after the 2 slashes in this line is not part of the program. It's just for you to read. So they will just ignore it and go on to the next line. And if you want to write comments over multiple lines in C#, you use a slash followed by an asterisk. Sorry, without space. And then you just type. And to end it, you use asterisk followed by slash. So it's like symmetrical. Yeah. So now that I've covered that, I can go into the concept of variables. So variables are another like very important concept in programming in general. And what variables are basically is like a container to store a value and store information inside of it. So I'm sure everyone here has learned mathematics and algebra. So like in algebra, you always have like x equals this, y equals that, z equals that kind of thing. So variables are very similar to that concept where you assign a value to an identifier name. So let me just show you some of them. Like let's say, and in C#, when you declare variables, you have to declare exactly like what kind of data is stored in the variable before you declare it. So let's say you want to declare a number x, an integer. You have to type int x equals to, let's say 10, and the apostrophe. So you have to specify that x is going to contain an integer, and then you assign the value of 10 to x using the equal sign. Yeah, so like, yeah, and variables are very important because, like, let's say you are coding and you want to change a certain part of your program. If you didn't use variables, you would have to go back to like every single instance of that thing and change it. So let me just write a small example to illustrate this point. Let's say you are writing a story. Mary has 3 books and she gave away. Right. So let's say this isn't just like a 1-line story, it's like a 100-page book about Mary and her books. And you suddenly, like, after writing everything, you suddenly decided that Mary is too generic a name and you want to change the name. So yeah, you would have to go to every instance that you said Mary and change her name. So that's not very good. So even though declaring variables and replacing them might be kind of troublesome at the start, it's very important if you want to change so that you can easily change values in the future. So what you can do is declare a string name. And yeah, for words, the data type is string. So you have to declare that the variable is going to contain information of the type string. Then you can give it any name you want, like Tom, I don't know. And so now, instead of writing this out like this, you can write name. And what this does is that it will print out the value that name has, which is Tom, and then plus all these. So it will print out name has 3 books with the space here. And let's say you don't just want to change the name, you want to change the number of books he has as well. So you can declare a variable books, and let's say now it has 5 books. So name plus and this plus thing is actually something called concatenating the string, which is adding 2 strings together, but I'll be going through that in more detail later. So yeah, after you change all this, though, you realize that here there's a value that, like, it takes the number of books she has minus 2, and she has 1 book left. So yeah, something that's very useful about variables as well is that you can actually perform mathematical operations on the variable. So book minus 2. So if you print this out now, you see that Tom has 5 books. Oh, I forgot to change the gender. Right, so it's supposed to be he. And yeah, this is another illustration of like how important variables are, because yeah, it will lead to a lot of inconsistencies if you didn't do everything as a variable from the start. So he gave 2 away and now has 3 left. Yeah, so now that I've talked about variables, let me just go through like the different kinds of data types that are in C# and in programming languages in general, because you need to declare the data type before you can declare variables, right? So like some of the basic ones are like string, I showed you just now. The string is basically a word. And what it means is like a string of characters, and each letter is a character. So another data type would be character, which is the short form to char. And yeah, this takes in only one character. And if you declare the wrong data type, you type in more than 1 character, it will show an error. And how you declare characters is using single quotations. So yeah, let's say like the alphabet A. And then there's also integer that I showed you just now. And like other than integers, there's also decimal numbers, right? So in C# to declare decimal numbers, there's 3 different kinds of data types. There's the float, the double, and then there's decimal. So what these are is basically they're all 3 of them are to declare decimal numbers, but in ascending order of precision. So float is like 10 plus decimal places. Double is like 30 plus. I can't really remember the exact number. Either 30 plus or 60 plus. And decimal is the most precise. So a lot of decimal places. And for practical users, most of the time when you're coding, you will use double. But I'll just show you all of them. So to declare a float though, you can't just type like 0.1 with the apostrophe. You have to actually put a suffix f to the end, so like 0.1 f, to tell the program that this is a float that you're declaring. Because the default that they think you are declaring is a double. So for a double though, the suffix for doubles is d. You don't actually have to write suffix for double because that is the default. But if you want consistency throughout, you can just write it. And then for decimals, the suffix is m, which is kind of like ym, but yeah. And yeah, other than all these, there's also a very important data type in programming known as the Boolean, which we write out as a bool. And what this Boolean is basically that it can only contain two values, true and false. So it's a binary kind of data type. There's only two values. And this is very important in programming in cases where you want to, like let's say you want to keep doing something until a certain piece of information becomes like as long as a certain piece of information is true. So like maybe an analogy would be like you decided to go shower and you want to keep continuing to shower until as long as you are dirty is true. And the moment you are dirty becomes false, you stop showering, right? So yeah, that's kind of like how programs work with the Boolean. So it only takes in two values. Let's say Boolean lie is false, Boolean true. So this is the only two values that Boolean can take. Yeah. So now I went through the data types. I can just go through like data manipulation. So yeah, I'll just start with working with numbers since that's more intuitive. So yeah, we've all learned math before, right? So working with numbers, you can use the simple mathematical operators, plus, minus, times, divide. And yeah, it's important to note that in programming languages in general, times is replaced, it's not x, because you know we always use x. Wait, what did I do? Yeah, we always use x like to declare variables and such, but it's replaced with this asterisk sign. And yeah, we don't even have the divide sign on our keyboard, so it's replaced with this slash. So to perform a mathematical operator, we can just start by declaring the variable. Yeah, you can just do x plus 10 or something like that. And then if you print it out, it will print out 20. So yeah, this works for any of the operators. I can just show one more to illustrate. So x times 10, 10 times 10 gives you 100. And something important to note as well is that when you divide two integers by each other, like let's say 5, x equals to 5, and you divide it by 3, you will actually get an integer as the result, so 1. And yeah, 5 divided by 3 is clearly not 1, right? So in order to solve that issue, you must change at least one of the values to a decimal, like a double. So now it's 5 divided by 3.0, which is technically the same thing, but it's very different. So now they'll actually give you the actual result. Yeah. And this is quite important because that's a very big difference. Yeah, and other things you can do with numbers is that, all right, before that though, there's also a very important mathematical operator in like more complex programming problems known as this thing called a modulo. So what this does is that it takes like let's say x modulo 3. So this takes x divided by 3 and gives you the remainder of the operation. So if 5 divided by 3, the remainder. So yeah, that's what it gives you. So other than these basic mathematical operators, you can also do like more complicated things, like by accessing this thing called math. And what math is basically a class in C# that has a lot of like pre-coded in Python you would call them functions, but here we call them methods. So yeah, if you do math dot, you will see like all this really long list of methods. I mean, if you're using the online code compiler, you won't see it, but here you can see. And with the star are those that are like very commonly used. So you can take the minimum of two values, the maximum, this is square root, the value of pi and such. So I can just show you a few. Like, let's say math.abs gives you the absolute value of what you write inside the parentheses. So let's say you write minus 10. So absolute value is basically just the positive version. So like it will always be positive. So it'll give you 10. Or like let's say you want to find the minimum of two values. So you type in two different values here. And it will give you the minimum value, which is the lower value. And max just does the opposite. And yeah, you can use pi to access the pi value. So it'll be like this. And yeah, square root gives you the square root of the value that you type in, like 36. So square root of 36 is 6. And it'll give you that. Yeah, and just now I said that the using is kind of like an import. So here you can see the idea. If like I say using static system.math, the apostrophe. So now you don't have to keep typing out math. You can just simply type square root, and they know that you're using math because you declare it here that you want to kind of like use math. So yeah, now you don't have to type the math and it gives you the answer. So this is very useful if you're going to keep constantly using the like methods from the class math throughout your program. Then you don't have to keep on typing out math or something. Yeah, you can just do this. So other than that, that's kind of it for working with numbers. And I'll now talk about string manipulation. So that's like just now you saw a lot of different things you can do with numbers, and you can do that for words as well. So I can just start by declaring. And then you can just print it out like this. So just now we printed out a bunch of words to the console with the apostrophe, sorry, the open quotation marks. But if you declare a variable beforehand, you can just print it out without the quotation marks. And let's say you want to print out. Let's say you want to print out introduction to C#. You want it to be in two different lines. So far, all we've been doing is printing out values in the same line, right? And let's say you want to print it out in two different lines, but you don't want to write console.writeLine twice, which is quite troublesome. So you can use this thing, \n. So what this does is it just tells the program that you want to move on to the next line, like after this, and it won't read this as part of the string. So \n, and you'll print it out in two different lines. Introduction to, and then a new line, C#. So something else you can do as well is like, you know how we have been telling the program what we want to write using the open quotations. But let's say you want to write you want to print out the open quotations, like to show that C# is the language or something, to emphasize it. But if you type it out, there's a problem now because yeah, the program is very confused, like what you want to print. So to get by that, you can use the backslash behind each quotation mark that you want to print out. And what the backslash does is that it tells the program that the character following is a special character, and just tells the program to read it as a string rather than like a character to print out rather than a command. So yeah, if you do that, now you'll print out the apostrophe with no errors. Then yeah, just now I mentioned like string concatenation. So that's basically the concept of adding two strings together and printing it out with the plus symbol. So let's say I want to welcome to this workshop, and yeah, because I've declared the phrase is introduction to C#. So welcome to plus the phrase, and print out an addition of the two strings in a way. So that's known as string concatenation. And then yeah, just now I showed you like a bunch of methods with math to perform various like more complicated mathematical operation, then those methods exist for strings as well. So like some of them, like if you like phrase dot, you can see this list of methods. There's a lot of them, and you can explore them in your free time if you want. So like you can see the top one is length. So doing this gives you the length of the string, which is basically the number of characters in the string, inclusive of the spaces. And yeah, other methods include like toUpper, which what it does is it changes every single letter in the string to uppercase letters. And there's also toLower, which does the opposite, changing everything to lowercase letters. And then there's also like this contains, so you can with the parentheses and you can type something in here. So like let's say introduction. What this does is it gives you a Boolean value, true or false, whether the string contains the word introduction. So in this case, it's true. There's also like let's say you only want to access one letter in the string, you can use this square brackets and then you type in the index of the letter. So when you have a string, it's actually a string of characters and each character is given an index. And in programming languages, indexes always start from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. And I corresponds to 0 and it's given the index of 0, and n is given the index of 1, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So if you use a phrase, then square brackets 2, you will only access the character at index 2, which is the third character. So you get T. And other interesting things you can do is like index of. So if you do this and you, let's say index of C#, what this will print out is the index in which the word C# starts at. So here we find out that it's 16, right? And this piece of information is useful to use with this function, this method called substring, where you can print out only a portion of the string starting from a certain index. So if we write 16 here, from the information we got just now, we'll just print out C#, which is the words that from 16, index of 16 onwards. And by default, it goes to the end, but you can also specify how many characters you want to print out, like after from 16. So let's say we only want to print out one character from 16. So it'll just print out C. Yeah. So that's it for string manipulation. And I guess now I'll be showing you how to get user input. So far, when we write out a line to the console, we have been using console.writeLine, right? Let's say we want to write a program that asks the user for their name. And what this will do is that you'll write what is your name, and then I'll read it, and I can't actually input any information into the program. So instead of doing console.writeLine, which actually writes the line and goes on to the next line, you can do console.write. So now, yeah, if you do that, you can see that it's waiting for an input. So I write my name. Yeah, I can write in my name, right? But right now it's not doing anything with that information. So when you get user input, you want to store the user input into a variable so that you can access what the user wrote. So you can do declare a variable name, and you put the value of console readline into the variable. So whatever is read from what you input is read into the variable name. So now if I do this, it's actually read. My name is actually read into the variable name. But so to show more clearly that this happened, write a program that welcomes the user based on what name you input. So and you use string concatenation. Yeah, and don't forget like a second console.readline, because now you are printing out something. So I type in my name, and now it reads the value that I input into the variable name and prints it out here on the second line. Yeah, so now I'll be going through something slightly more advanced, which is if-else conditional statements. So if-else conditional statements are statements that the program uses to like tell the program what to do given pieces of information. Like if something is true, then you execute this chunk of code, and if something else is true, then you do something else. So like an analogy would be if you wake up, let's say you wake up in the morning on a school day, if it's already like 5 hours past your school time, like let's say you wake up at 12, you would tell yourself that like, you know, it's already too late, there's no point to go to school anymore, so you just go back to sleep, right? But let's say you wake up and you look at the alarm clock and it's like 8 a.m. and yeah, you're just a little bit late for school, so you still have to drag yourself out of the bed and you have to move quickly and get to school. But let's say you wake up and it's like 1 hour early from when you usually wake up. So you either go back to bed or you know you move very slowly, you wake up and you just slowly get ready. So all these, what we're doing here is like we process a piece of information and then we decide the course of action. So if-else statements basically allows the computer to do that. So in C#, for if-else statements, you write if and then you declare your condition in parentheses. So like before we do that though, we can just declare a variable. So yeah, like in x equal to 10, right? So here you can write your condition. Then braces. So whatever code you want your program to execute, if this condition is true, you write within these curly braces. So maybe here we just want to tell the user and then to specify a second condition, you use else if. You do the same thing, you write your condition in parentheses. If x is, let's say now it's greater than 10. And then curly braces. Here is what you want the program to do, given that x is greater than 10. And then, yeah, once you finish stating all your conditions, then you only left one condition. And there's only one other possibility though, that it can be. So in this case, like x is 10, x is greater than 10. So the only other possible outcome is that x is less than 10, right? So you can just write else instead of else if, and you don't need to like specify what it does, and the computer automatically knows like x is. But yeah, even though the computer knows, it's actually good practice, especially if you are doing project work or whatever, and it's for your own readability as well, to either leave a comment as to what this does, so you know, right? Or just write if else and write else if and yeah, write the condition so that it's clearer. So if you run this program now, oh wait, I forgot the console read line. Like what this is outside all the curly braces. So like after all this, no matter what's the outcome, this will execute. Yes, we run the program now. Like you'll print x equals to 10 because I declared that x is 10 at the start. Yeah, if I put like x equals to 9, then yeah, I'll print x is less than 10. And if I change this to 12, it'll print greater than 10. So you can see that it works. So other than all these, no, like to declare conditions, to like specify conditions that you want your program, like to specify conditions. Here you can see, like maybe you notice I didn't write equals here. I wrote equals equals. So because in programming, equals is actually like assigning the value of the right side to the variable name on the left side. So to check whether two values are equal, you use the double equal sign. So like this checks whether the left value is equal to the right value. And to check the opposite, whether they are not equal, you use a exclamation mark followed by an equal. And then other symbols to check for conditions is greater than, less than, and greater than or equals to is given by this symbol, greater followed by equal. And this is less than or equals to. And then, yeah, there's also like true and not true, stuff like that, or false. So, yeah, these are the different symbols you can use to check for specify conditions. And let's say you want to specify two different conditions, and you want the code to execute only if both conditions are fulfilled. So you can do that by using this symbol and. So yeah, in Python, this is you just write N, A and D in English, but in C# you have to use this double N symbol, and this basically just stands for N. So maybe I can like show here. Oh wait, and x equals to 11. So this will only run if like both conditions are fulfilled. So now x equals to 12, so it doesn't run, it's not working. And if I change x to 11, it works now. So other than that, there's also other than and there's also or, which is given by this weird symbol, the straight line, and it's on the same key as your backslash. So this stands for or. And what this does is it will execute this chunk of code given that only one of these two conditions, as long as only one of these two conditions are fulfilled. So if one is fulfilled or if both is fulfilled, it will run the program. It will run this chunk of code within the curly braces. So like if I change this to all, doesn't matter whether x is not 11, like x is 90. It will still like give me that what I wrote there, because x fulfills one condition in that is greater than 10. So yeah, now that I've gone through like the basics of if else statements, we can just begin like coding our calculator. So if you want to make a calculator, what do you need to do, right? So firstly, maybe we can tell the users that this is a calculator, so they know what to input. And we just want to make a very simple calculator that adds two values together. So in order to do that, what we need firstly is to allow the user to input the first digit, store it as a variable, allow the user to input the second digit, store that as a variable, and then add those two numbers together and then print out the result, right? So console.write. So this asks prompts the user for the first digit. This prompts the user for the second digit, and you want to save these numbers in a variable. So what you might do is int num1 equals to console.readline. And you want to store the second digit as a variable as well. And then what you want to do is add those two together, right? So and then print it out. So and then concatenate, and then you just add num1 plus num2. And remember the extra brackets here to say that you're doing operation. But if you try to run this now, you'll see that it doesn't work. There's build errors. So why this happens is that when you ask the user for input and the user writes in an input, it's automatically processed as like a string. So they can't tell that what you're typing. You want it to be a number. It's a string to the computer. So here you declare that the variable is an integer. So they're like, oh, this isn't what you said. It's a string, it's not an integer. So yeah, there's an error. So to solve this, you can use the very handy method in 32. And you put the whole thing in parentheses. So now what that does is that it converts the string that you receive into an integer. And now there won't be any errors. So like if you run this, enter your first digit 7, second digit 20, then you print it out, and it works very nice. But there's a small little problem, is that let's say your user is being a bit annoying, and he wants to add decimal values like 8.7. So now this throws an error. Your program stops working. It's very confused. So the problem now is that you key in a decimal number with a decimal place, but here you wrote that is an integer, and you ask it to convert to integer. So it doesn't work because you can't convert a decimal number to an integer. Yeah, so the program is not happy and it doesn't work. So to get past this problem, instead of using convert to integer, you can use another very handy method, convert to double. And so now instead of converting to integer, what it does is that it converts the string to a double. And this is very useful because like doubles can take in integer values as well as decimal values. So yeah, it won't have any error. And yeah, remember to change this integer at the left to double as well. So now if you key in decimal values, it'll give you the result a bit too precise, but yeah. So yeah, now you've managed to make a very simple calculator. And actually given what I taught you just now about if-else statements, you can actually make a more complicated calculator, like something that, let's say, takes in an operator. So it asks the user whether you want to plus, minus, times, or divide, and then you check whether what the user key in, whether it's plus, minus, times, or divide. And if it's plus, you add the first number by second number. If it's minus, you do minus, and so on and so forth. So yeah, with just like this very basic knowledge, you can actually do quite a lot of things. So yeah. Wait. Yeah, so that's it for my workshop. So thank you for listening. Hope you have a nice day. Slightly early, but yeah.